Let me ask you a question. Do you ever fantasize about winning the lottery, or you dream about being granted 3 wishes by a genie of the lamp? It's probably safe to say that everyone has. It's a part of human nature to relish in the idea of having our deepest desires handed to us on a plate. To imagine having the power to make all your dreams come true on a whim. Obviously, these are nothing but wishful thinking, something that our brain whips up to help people escape the dissatisfaction they may have with certain aspects of real life. But what if someone actually had the power to make dreams come true? Would it really be that good of a thing? Even if they had the best of intentions. That's what the character of Takuto Maruki explores, and maybe he can show us that if a human could make dreams come to fruition, would it actually make things right? Dr. Takuto Maruki is a character that has resonated profoundly with everyone who played Persona 5 Royal. There's something about him that just radiates a friendly warmth. What makes him so impactful is the feeling of familiarity he gives off. Maruki has experienced and been shaped by many of the trials in life that we've all experienced for ourselves. For example, much of his motivation stems from the regret of not being able to protect his lover from the criminals who robbed her. He carries this guilt around with him and so desperately wants to undo the mental damage he caused Rumi that night. As people, we can all relate to this. Everyone at some point is stuck dwelling on past events, wishing we could have responded differently. Additionally, Maruki's heartbreak from when he and Rumi went separate ways is another trial that most people have to take on, especially for the teenage target audience of Persona, presuming that they actually talk to people. Finally comes his financial issues that hinders his dream. Once Maruki's funding for his research into cognitive science was withdrawn, he was no longer able to fulfill his goal of curing mental illness, and his spirits were crushed. So many people dream of becoming something like a singer or an actor, but truth be told, we gotta put money on the table. So we settle for a slow 9-to-5 job, and eventually lose the time to follow our dreams. No matter who you are, you'll see a bit of yourself through Maruki, and you'll develop a bond with Maruki through what's known as the familiarity heuristic. To put it briefly, the familiarity heuristic is when your brain deems something as much more significant than everything else, because it relates to events that you've experienced and are familiar with. Now, to get a little less existential and depressing, we gotta mention how nice Maruki is. Despite his past, Maruki is a friendly, decent guy who has a caring side for others. Despite no longer being able to continue his research in cognitive science, he still seeks to alleviate as much mental suffering as he can through his career as a counselor. If that doesn't make you appreciate a stand-up dude like him, I don't know what will. I mean, come on. He has snacks. So Maruki, in our heads, has been built up to be the perfect guy. We subconsciously projected ourselves onto him alongside Joker. This is where the difference between Maruki and everyone else comes in, because Maruki actually obtains the power of making the dreams of others come true, to eliminate any pain within the mind. He gets what he's always wanted. If you're watching this video, I assume you've played Persona 5, and know how this happened, but if you haven't, long story short, he becomes God and can rewrite people's cognitions. Yes, that's it. Through gaining this power, we can see the human flaws of Dr. Maruki begin to expose themselves. You may hear Maruki's mission of curing all mental suffering and think it's one of the soundest ideas you've ever heard. But his mission is tainted with the haste that so often leads to the downfall of our own ideas. Let me use the example of Sumire Yoshizawa. Sumire was so distraught that her sister Kasumi had died saving her life that she wanted to become Kasumi. She could not cope with or contain the feeling of guilt she had over the fact that Kasumi's dream of becoming the world gymnastics champion could never be actualized because of her own selfish actions. The guilt was so much that she wanted to become Kasumi in order to fulfill her dream. Any normal counselor would help Sumire come to terms with what happened and help her accept herself as Sumire and move on in life. But instead, Maruki used his power to rewrite her cognition so that Sumire genuinely believed she was Kasumi. This act was done purely out of Maruki's kindness and compassion, but it was the wrong thing to do. In this regard, Maruki actually failed as a counselor. He granted Sumire what her painted cognition felt she needed, rather than the help she truly needed. And he denied her the chance to grow Sumire, and instead had her fall deeper into her problem as Kasumi. Maruki is using his power over the people's cognition and causes the masses to live in a lie. Sure, they may seem happy on the surface level, but they'll never grow to be their true selves. It's the trials of life that shapes you into the person you genuinely are, not your ideal self that Dr. Maruki has spun up for you. To fully demonstrate the flaw in granting everyone their greatest desire, look at Joker. His greatest desire was to be able to meet Akechi again so they could have their second duel that Akechi promised. And Maruki's powers brought Akechi back for Joker. May seem nice of Maruki to do that, but Akechi's a serial killer. He should probably stay dead. He wasn't even charged for any crimes in Maruki's reality. I mean, you tell me how that's just. Ultimately, the message of the character of the familiar Dr. Maruki is the difference between the player and him. We're never going to get the power to grant people their greatest desires. What we want isn't going to be handed to us on a plate like it was for Maruki. We need to make the most of what we have, and take what life gives you, because that's what creates who you really are. Of course, you can learn from his familiar aspects too. I mean, you can take his side if you want to, but the fact that he's so similar to us shows that we're probably better off without that kind of power, because our ideal reality is going to be just as flawed as his. The message Dr. Maruki gives fills us with conflict, which is great since it makes that final fight way more impactful. Just this part right here, where him and Joker are throwing themselves at each other, it hits hard. Every punch you throw feels really painful, since you know this man had anything but evil intentions. Even if you're against Maruki, there will always be that draw towards a reality like the one he created, which makes every in-game blow that much more significant as you consider the sacrifices your character is making. There may be times when you fall into the lure of the human fantasy. You might let it whisk you away, and when you finally return, you may find yourself a bit lost in life. But Maruki also shows that it can happen to the best of us. But he also shows that no matter what, you'll always be able to start over. And that's probably the best message any game can give to an audience of people who are about to step into the brave new world of adulthood. And it's what makes a character like Takuto Maruki, someone who is flawed to perfection.